Dominic Devereaux sat across from his father, watching the older man toss a glossy tabloid onto the table. The headline screamed his name, alongside a photo of him leaving a club at 30 a.m. with a socialite. Another one, Dominic? His father sighed. Dominic barely glanced at the photo. At least I don't have my hand on this one's ass. His father's expression darkened. You're 38. When are you going to grow up and take some responsibility? Dominic clenched his jaw. He and his younger brother Blake ran the most powerful law firm in the country, making millions for their father's company. Yet, all his father focused on was his personal life. You want to talk responsibility? Dominic shot back. How many women have you slept with this month? That's not the point. His father's voice was laced with disapproval. You carry the Devereaux name. Your mother would be ashamed to see it dragged through gossip magazines. Don't use Mom against me. I will when it's true. His father's fist slammed against the table, his face red with frustration. Dominic wanted to fight back, but after the heart attack 4 months ago, he restrained himself. His father sighed, leaning back. I let you run your own firm. I said nothing when you recruited Blake. But I don't understand why you refused to carry on our family's name. Dominic exhaled. Just because I didn't go into tech, you think I'm ashamed of us? His father gestured toward the magazine. Then why do you flaunt our name like this? This isn't how a Devereaux behaves. Oh, like Mason? Dominic challenged, mentioning his older brother. His father scowled. Mason understands duty. He's miserable in that marriage. Silence stretched between them. His father couldn't argue that. Instead, he changed tactics. I don't know how long I have left, Dominic. Dominic groaned. You're 68, not 90. Mason and Mason are handling the company. You should focus on your health. His father studied him, eyes softening. I want the Devereaux name to last for generations. You, son, are my best hope for that. Dominic frowned. You have 5 sons. Mason's marriage won't produce children. Maddox drifts from place to place. Mason. His father shook his head. Blake is too dedicated to his job. And I'm not? You achieve the same results with half the effort. You always have. Dominic stiffened. So I don't work hard enough? I'm saying you're the only one who can balance it all. You need to marry and have children. Dominic barked a laugh. That's a big ask. This is the only thing I'll ever ask of you, his father said solemnly. You were born lucky, son. You don't believe in love, so what are you really giving up? Dominic swallowed hard. He'd always wanted a family, but not like this. I'll need to find someone first. His father smiled. Don't worry. I have that covered. Across town, Arya Edison stirred her tea, dreading another Sunday afternoon with her mother. Vincent has news for you, her mother announced, referring to her older brother. Arya frowned. Vincent is here? He has something important to discuss. Vincent strolled in, arrogant as ever. I've found a solution to our financial problems. Arya stiffened. She didn't have financial problems, he did. He'd mishandled the family trust fund, leaving them nearly bankrupt. I don't need money, Vincent, she said coolly. He smirked. This isn't just about you. It's about our family's future. She braced herself. What are you talking about? I've arranged a match for you. Arya's stomach twisted. A match? A husband. She blinked. You're joking. He's a billionaire. I don't care if he's the king of England. I'm not marrying a stranger. Vincent's expression darkened. You'll do what's necessary for this family. Tears burned Arya's eyes. Mom? She pleaded. Her mother looked away. Vincent's grip tightened on Arya's thigh, his nails digging in. You'll marry who I tell you to, Arya. Or have you forgotten you're the reason our father is dead? She gasped, shaking her head. He blamed her for years, twisting the truth. Are you going to listen now? Vincent asked, his voice dripping with control. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Yes. He released her, smirking. Good girl. You should be grateful. Despite your history, I secured quite the catch. She wiped her tears. Who? Dominic Devereaux. Her heart pounded. Dominic Devereaux? The man with a different woman every week? The lawyer with ice in his veins? He's very handsome, her mother said. Arya let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, so was Ted Bundy. Vincent's smirk widened. He's agreed to take you as his wife, and all he asks in return is 2 heirs. Her breath caught. You know I might not be able to. You got pregnant before, Vincent cut in. We know you're capable. Arya's stomach churned. What if I don't agree? she whispered. Vincent's expression hardened. Then Mom loses the house, and Paige drops out of college. Arya's hands shook. Her younger sister had sacrificed everything to escape this family's clutches. She wouldn't let Vincent ruin Paige's future too. She was trapped. "I'll do it," she whispered. Vincent grinned. "That's my girl." Arya. Adrian gaped at Arya from across the kitchen island, a half-eaten pizza between them. "He wants you to what?" "Marry a random guy and have his kids," Arya huffed, throwing her hands in the air. "Baby girl, I can believe anything of your brother." "But damn." Adrian shook his head, stuffing a large bite of pizza into his mouth. Arya exhaled sharply. "And the guy he's picked? Dominic Devereaux. New York's most eligible bachelor. A lawyer for the mob with ice in his veins." Adrian arched a brow. "Is he hot?" "That is not the point." Grinning, he pulled out his phone and typed in Dominic's name. A few seconds later, his jaw dropped. "Holy fuck, Goose. This guy is gorgeous." Arya leaned over to glance at the image. Dominic stood in a tuxedo, scowling at the camera. She couldn't deny it, he was attractive. If someone liked arrogant, grumpy assholes. Adrian stared, practically drooling. "He looks like Henry Cavill's hotter brother." Arya rolled her eyes. "Oddly specific." "I mean, I'll marry him if you won't." She nudged him. "Pretty sure you're not his type, Mav." "Damn shame," he sighed before scrolling further. "Wait, holy shit. What now? Did you know he has 4 brothers? And they're all insanely hot?" He held the phone out, revealing a picture of Dominic with his brothers and father at a charity event. Adrian whistled. "Even his dad is." "What?" "Those are some good genes, baby girl. At least your kids would be beautiful." Arya laughed despite herself. "All babies are beautiful." Adrian wrinkled his nose. "Not Paige when she was born. She looked like a troll doll." Arya gasped, smacking his arm. "She was adorable." He snickered. "Now she is. But damn, she was rough for a minute." Shaking her head, Arya studied Dominic's image again. "You see why I'm confused? What does a guy like this want with me?" Adrian wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Are you serious? You're smart, kind, beautiful, and funny. He'd be lucky to have you." Arya sighed. "I just don't get it." Adrian scrolled through more pictures. "At least you're not one of the fake models he's always seen with." Not helping Ad. He pressed a kiss to her head. "You're the best person I know, Ari. Don't forget that." Dominic exhaled sharply as he recounted his father's latest scheme to his brothers over drinks. Mason shook his head, Mason grinned, and Dominic drained half his beer. "Yeah, you see what happens when you two assholes skip Sunday brunch?" "Sorry, bro." Mason smirked. "Had a date last night." Dominic rolled his eyes. "I thought you were seeing that catalog model?" Mason shrugged. "Fizzled out. He was too clingy." Mason raised a brow. "And too pretty for your usual type." Mason grinned. "I do like them rough around the edges." Dominic tuned out their banter, jealousy flickering for a brief second. Dating had lost its appeal. Even sex was becoming monotonous. Mason turned serious. "So Dad already picked your bride?" Dominic nodded. "Meeting set for Thursday." "Who is she?" Mason asked. "Arya Edison." Mason's brows shot up. "Luke Edison's daughter?" Dominic nodded again. Mason grinned. "She was in high school when I was there. My friends thought she was hot." Dominic had done his research. Brunette, curves in all the right places, an animal lover, and someone who clearly hated the spotlight. He'd been intrigued by a few candid pictures of her laughing. "She's still hot," he admitted. "But that's not the point." Mason tapped his chin. "I heard she works as a vet's assistant." "Veterinary nurse," Dominic corrected. "She volunteers at a shelter too." Mason nodded approvingly. "So she's actually a good person." "At least there's that." Mason frowned. "I remember something about her dropping out of college for rehab." Might have been a rumor. Dominic had come across the same reports. He dug deeper, finding nothing scandalous, just a brief absence from school. But what intrigued him most was her apparent lack of interest in money. Mason narrowed his eyes. "So Dad wants grandkids and a legacy. But what does Arya get out of this?" Mason snorted. "A billionaire husband." Mason shook his head. "She doesn't seem like a gold digger. And why her? Why not some heiress or socialite?" Dominic sighed. "Technically, she's an heiress. Edison Holdings is failing, and her family's looking for investors. Dad's not interested in bailing them out, but a marriage into our family gives their business credibility. Mason groaned. Great. So what's in it for her? Dominic shrugged. Maybe she wants stability. Or kids. Mason studied him. So you're considering it? Dominic exhaled. He was getting older. Dating was a drag. He had nothing to lose. Enough to meet her and see what she's after, yeah. Mason clapped him on the back. Mason snickered. Dominic drained his beer and muttered, I should have ordered something stronger. Arya's feet ached as she exited work, longing for her bed. The sight of a familiar car made her stomach drop. Vincent. Her brother approached with a smarmy smile. Need a ride, sis? She sighed. I'll take the subway. His expression darkened. Get in the fucking car. She hesitated, then relented. Arguing was useless. Vincent always won. Sliding into the leather seat, she barely had time to exhale before he brought up the inevitable. Have you thought about my proposal? To marry Dominic Devereaux and pop out his kids? She snapped. Vincent sighed. Look, I know I didn't sell it well, but you don't have to stay married forever. Play your cards right, and you're out in a year. 2 at most. Arya clenched her jaw. And what exactly do I get out of this? A morality clause, he said smugly. Her brows furrowed. What? A clause in the prenup that guarantees you a payout if he cheats. Arya scoffed. And what if he doesn't? Vincent smirked. Then we make him cheat. Her stomach turned. You're suggesting a honey trap? Exactly. No, Vincent. That's disgusting. He rolled his eyes. Arya, do you know the kind of man Dominic Devereaux is? He changes women weekly supermodels, actresses, escorts. He's a mob lawyer. He's going to cheat anyway. We just need proof. Arya turned away, glaring out the window. First, Vincent had sold Dominic as a dream husband. Now, he was painting him as a monster. Which was true. Vincent softened his tone. You know this is the right thing to do. For Mom? For Paige. For Paige. Not for Vincent. Not for their mother. But Paige needed her. Will you at least come to the meeting tomorrow? He coaxed. Tears burned in her eyes. Ari? She exhaled. Yes. I'll go. Dominic watched his date storm off, flipping him the bird before disappearing inside her building. He snorted, unimpressed. Their evening had ended in disaster, much like his previous dates. Even an intimate moment had left him cold. The thrill was gone, and he knew it wasn't her fault. Something inside him had changed. Home, sir? Teddy, his driver asked. Dominic nodded. Yeah, home. In his office, his younger brother, Blake, paced restlessly. So, how serious are you about this meeting today? Are you actually considering Dad's proposal? Dominic leaned back, contemplating. I'm considering marrying this woman and having kids. Is that insane? Blake rubbed his jaw, studying him. It depends. Are you doing this just because Dad asked, or is there something in it for you? Dominic thought about it. The endless string of women. The meaningless conversations, none of it excited him anymore. I don't want to fall in love, Blake. I never will. But a stable marriage with someone I can trust? That makes sense. Blake sighed. Okay, so if you meet her today and don't hate her on sight, you'll go through with it? Dominic smirked. I'll know within 5 minutes if we're compatible. Blake chuckled. Your whole love life exhausts me. Dominic shrugged. Maybe I won't have one for much longer. His secretary poked her head in. Your guests are here. Blake raised an eyebrow. Time to meet the potential in-laws. Dominic adjusted his suit. Let's do this. The boardroom was filled with voices, Vincent Edison, their family lawyer, and Dominic's own legal team. But Dominic's eyes locked on the woman standing by the window. Miss Edison, he said. She turned, her green eyes sharp, her stance poised. Mr. Devereaux. She stepped forward, her movements controlled. Dominic noted the slight curl of her hand into a fist and the pink flush on her neck. Interesting. Arya, come sit, her brother ordered. Dominic's jaw tightened. Who the hell did this guy think he was? Arya hesitated before taking a seat. The meeting dragged with legal jargon until Dominic finally cut through the noise. Give us the room. Vincent scoffed. That's not happening. Dominic didn't even look at him. Give us the room. Blake stood. Let's go, he said, ushering the others out. Vincent reluctantly followed, leaving Dominic and Arya alone. Silence stretched between them before he spoke. Why are you doing this, Miss Edison? She didn't hesitate. Because it's good for our families. He tilted his head. No. That's why your family asked you to do this. But what do you get out of it? She blinked, clearly unprepared for the question. How about you tell me what's in it for you? He smirked. Respectability. An heir or two? She frowned. You could have any woman you want. Why not marry for love? Dominic snorted. Do you believe in marrying for love? I believe people can, but that doesn't mean it's what I want, she countered. So what do you want, Arya? She hesitated. He pressed. It's not a difficult question. Finally, she exhaled. I just want some peace, Dominic. I want to work, come home, and not worry about my sister's tuition or my mother losing our family home because my brother is reckless. Dominic studied her. I appreciate your honesty. She frowned. You know we're struggling financially, yet you're still considering this? He leaned back. If you resent me for this, we'll be miserable. I won't have my children growing up in a toxic household. So, this is your chance to back out. She bit her lip, weighing his words. Then, she squared her shoulders. I want to do this. He nodded. Good. But, she hesitated. I won't give up my job. Even when we have kids, I want to work part-time. He smirked. You're a veterinary nurse, right? She nodded. I don't want a trophy wife, Arya, he said, his voice steady. Her breath hitched. I'd also like to wait 6 months before having kids. Just to get to know each other. Dominic tapped his fingers against the table. A waiting period will prevent rumors that you were pregnant before the wedding. Fine. You can have your 6 months. And you can keep your job. Relief flickered across her face. Then it's agreed. We'll work out the finer details over dinner tonight. Her brows lifted. Dinner? He rolled his eyes. That meal people eat in the evenings. Can't we just do it here? He smirked. We could, but I'd rather not. We need public appearances before announcing our engagement. There will be photographers. Her face paled slightly. I don't want a media circus, Dominic. Neither do I, but appearances matter. She exhaled. You really have this all planned out. I don't leave anything to chance, Arya. He stood, adjusting his suit. I'll pick you up at 8. We're going to Lenardi's. Wear something appropriate. She bit back a retort and smiled instead. Of course. Dominic checked his watch impatiently as his driver, Teddy, pulled up outside Arya's apartment. He had left strict instructions for her to be ready by 8, and he expected punctuality. Just as he considered going up himself, the apartment door swung open. Arya stepped out, and Dominic's breath hitched. She was stunning. Her jade green dress clung to her body, accentuating every curve. A thigh-high slit revealed smooth, tanned skin, and her long, dark hair cascaded over her shoulder in loose waves. He bit his lip, forcing himself to look away as Teddy opened the door for her. Thank you, Tedward, she teased with a laugh before slipping into the car. Dominic's jaw clenched. His name is Teddy. She grinned. He didn't seem to mind. He studied her, noting her confidence. This wasn't the same nervous woman who had walked into his office earlier. She was playful, sharp. He had anticipated dinner to be a simple affair, but now he wasn't so sure. Have you been drinking? He asked. She scoffed. Not yet. Taken anything else? His tone was clipped. Her smile faltered, a flicker of hurt crossing her face. If we're going to be married, I guess you have a right to know about my past. She inhaled deeply. My rehab stint was exaggerated. I drink occasionally, but I don't do drugs. He studied her face, noting her clear, sharp eyes. Good to know. She relaxed, then smirked. You're different from what I expected, Mr. Devereaux. He leaned in, running a finger down the exposed skin of her back. And what do you expect now, Arya? Her breath hitched. The first date kind of nerves. He smirked. Had many first dates? Not as many as you, Iceman. Dominic chuckled, surprised by her knowledge of his reputation. So you do your research. Of course, she said, eyes twinkling. And for the record, Iceman was always better than Maverick. Dominic exhaled sharply, his control slipping. She was playing with fire and he was dangerously close to getting burned. Champagne? He offered. Her lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. Yes, please, Dominic. His name on her lips sent a jolt through him. This night was going to be interesting. Arya couldn't deny it. Dominic Devereaux was devastatingly attractive. With his chiseled jaw, dark eyes, and broad frame, he exuded power and confidence. He barely smiled, but when he did, it was like catching a glimpse of something rare and intoxicating. Dinner was better than she had expected. He was sharp, quick-witted, and surprisingly funny. And now, as they drove through the city, she found herself wishing the night wouldn't end so soon. It's such a nice night, she mused. Shame we couldn't have walked. Dominic pressed a button. Teddy, pull over. We'll walk. Arya blinked in surprise but didn't protest. As they strolled through the warm summer air, she shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. Shit, Dominic muttered before shrugging off his jacket and draping it over her shoulders. The warmth of his body lingered in the fabric, making her pulse quicken. Such a gentleman, she teased. He arched a brow. Surprised? She laughed. A little. He smirked. Why do I feel like you're constantly testing me? Maybe because I am, she admitted. If we're going to be married, I need to know if we're compatible. He stopped walking, turning to face her. And what do you need to know? Her eyes danced with mischief. If you have a sense of humor, good taste in movies, and whether you can make a woman, she licked her lips. Fluffy pancakes when she's craving sugar. Dominic laughed, a deep, rich sound that sent shivers down her spine. Why do I feel like I'm getting schooled by a siren? She grinned. I am neither pint-sized nor a siren. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. But you are, Spitfire. Arya swallowed, her breath catching. He was too close, too tempting. Are you going to invite me in for coffee? He murmured. She smirked. I'm not that kind of girl, Mr. Devereaux. His eyes darkened. Oh, we're back to Mr. Devereaux now. No cameras here, she whispered. No need to pretend. He stepped even closer, his breath warm against her skin. I think I saw paparazzi over there, he teased. She rolled her eyes. Nice try. He exhaled, stepping back reluctantly. I'll see you Saturday. She arched a brow. What if I have plans? He smirked. Do you? No, but that's beside the point. His smirk widened as he walked away. I'll pick you up at 7, Arya. Dominic sank into the leather seat of his car, Arya's scent still lingering on him. His body was tense, his mind replaying every moment of the night. He wanted her more than he had wanted anyone in a long time. Pulling out his phone, he texted his brother. You fancy a nightcap? Mason replied instantly. How was the date? Dominic hesitated before responding. Meet me at the bar and I'll tell you. Already 2 glasses of scotch in, Dominic slid a drink across the table as Mason arrived. So? Mason prompted. It was less painful than expected. Mason smirked. Wow. What a glowing review. Dominic sighed, swirling his drink. I don't marry for love. Mason snorted. Yeah, that worked great for me. He took a sip. So, what's the problem? Dominic exhaled sharply. I wanted to sleep with her. Mason laughed. And she said no? Poor baby. Dominic shot him a glare. I went into this thinking it was just dinner. She surprised me. So you like her? Dominic scowled. That's the problem. It complicates things. Mason smirked. Or makes them easier. If you're going to have kids, attraction isn't a bad thing. Dominic huffed. She was different tonight. Not the quiet woman from my office. She was fun. Flirty. Mason raised an eyebrow. Maybe she was nervous before. Dominic considered that. Maybe. So what's the plan? Dominic drained his glass. Saturday night. Mason grinned. Round 2. Dominic smirked. Let's see how long she can resist. Dominic leaned against his sleek black limo, arms crossed, watching Arya approach with a confident stride. He looked effortlessly handsome in casual jeans and a navy polo, his intense gaze sweeping over her bare legs and pink summer dress. You look beautiful, he murmured. Arya flushed. You look handsome. His smirk was knowing, as if he'd heard it countless times before. Holding the door open, he gestured. After you, Miss Edison. She climbed in carefully, and he muttered a curse under his breath. So, where are we going? She asked, peering at him. It's a surprise. Give me a clue? She batted her lashes. You'll love it. Moments later, they arrived at Central Park Zoo after hours. Arya's eyes widened in delight. But it's closed. Not for us. Dominic offered his arm, and she linked hers through his. Strolling past exhibits devoid of tourists, she sighed. This is perfect. Thank you. Dominic cleared his throat, seemingly embarrassed. You're welcome. After watching the sea lions up close, they sat on a bench, ice cream cones in hand. Dominic smirked. Tell me about your worst dates. Arya laughed. A guy took me to meet his mom on the first date. She sat at the table while we ate. Dominic winced. That's brutal. Not everyone has your game, Mr. Devereaux. You think I have game? She gestured around them. This setup? If this were a real date, I'd be riding you like a rodeo bull. Dominic choked on his ice cream. You'd be what? Arya's face turned crimson. Figure of speech. Dominic's amused expression darkened. This is a real date. His husky voice sent shivers through her. Desperate to shift the subject, she asked about his worst dates. A woman proposed to me before we even got to the restaurant. Arya gasped. No. And another tried to impress me with pole dancing, got a cramp, fell on her head. Spent the night in the ER. Laughing, she countered, I once had to take a guy to the hospital because he got his, stuck in his fly. Dominic winced. Ouch! And another time, a guy started singing Yeah by Usher while finishing. She mimicked the moment with an exaggerated hip thrust. Dominic doubled over laughing. That is the funniest thing I've ever heard. She grinned. Women always have worse date stories. Why? We have more to consider. Should I wax? Sexy panties or tummy control ones? Will he think I'm easy? Or too prude? Will he turn into an asshole if I say hi to a guy friend? Dominic arched a brow. Is he all about what? Possessive big dick energy. His gaze darkened. And what exactly is that? She smirked. When a guy acts dominant if he has the equipment to back it up. He shook his head. Had no idea that was a thing. Arya grinned. Having a huge, his low voice cut in. If this were a real date, Miss Edison, I'd put you over my knee for that. Heat coiled in her belly. A zookeeper approached, handing her a stuffed red panda. A gift from the zoo. Perfect timing. The moment shattered, but her heart pounded nonetheless. Dominic's text was unexpected. I assume you don't have plans for the 4th of July? She smirked. Why assume that? Because I haven't invited you anywhere yet. Arrogant. I actually have plans with 2 guys. For your sake, I hope they're Ben and Jerry. She snorted. Funny. But no, I'm working at the shelter. That's a terrible plan. I'll have fun. Caesar and Potato are great company. Her phone rang. She answered with a giggle. Hello? Who the hell are Caesar and Potato? A basset hound and a corgi. You'll be alone? His voice was sharp. There's a security guard. He sighed. Why are you working on a holiday? Because nobody else wanted to. Fine, Dominic muttered. I have to go. And just like that, he was gone. The shelter was quiet. Arya sat in the small office. Caesar curled at her feet while Potato sniffed around. Sarge, the security guard, peeked in. There's someone here to see you. She frowned. Who? Didn't say. But he brought a giant picnic basket. Her heart skipped. Could it be? She nodded. Moments later, Dominic walked in, dressed in gray sweats and a fitted white t-shirt. Actually, you look kind of cute, he said. Potato ran to sniff at the basket, and Dominic chuckled. Don't worry. I brought something for you too. Arya blinked. You brought dinner? For the dogs? And for you. Tears pricked her eyes. He smirked. Now, sit. Potato immediately obeyed. Arya gaped. He never listens to anyone. Dominic shrugged. Guess it's all in the tone. She swallowed hard. I'd probably sit too. She watched as he unpacked a meal, chicken wings, ribs, corn, cheesecake. He lifted a bottle. Non-alcoholic. Figured you can't drink here. Her chest ached. Why are you here? You're standing right in front of me, looking like I grew a second head. You never do anything that isn't for show. He smirked. Not everything is for the cameras, Ari. She bit her lip. Over dinner, she talked about the shelter's long-term residents. Caesar and Potato have been here for years. They had a few trial adoptions, but they always got returned. Eventually, we stopped trying. Dominic scratched behind Caesar's ears. Do you ever think about taking them home? She shook her head. When I started, I wanted to take them all. But we do what we can while they're here. Dominic's gaze softened. Arya exhaled. They belong here. A pause. Then, quietly, Dominic said, So do you. The words settled between them, heavy and unspoken. She swallowed hard. I meant with the shelter, Dominic. His blue eyes darkened. So did I. Silence stretched, only broken by the rhythmic wagging of Potato's tail. Dominic leaned forward, voice low. You don't have to do this alone, Arya. Her breath caught. For once, she had no clever reply. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted one. Dominic glanced at his phone and smirked at Arya's message. Is this a joke? Are you seriously choosing my clothes for our date? He replied quickly. It's a gift. You know what a gift is, surely? Her response came immediately. Feels like a possessive, big-shot move to me. Suppressing a chuckle, he thought about their past dates. Though they hadn't even kissed, the tension between them was undeniable. He wanted to see her in the dress he chose, knowing it would look incredible on her. Have you even looked at the dress? He texted. That's not the point. His secretary, Helen, tapped her pen on the notepad, a subtle reminder that he was in the middle of a meeting. With a final message, he wrapped up the conversation. Tonight is special. I wanted you to have something special to wear. If you don't love it, don't wear it. I'll send a car for you at 8. Placing his phone down, he forced himself to focus, though thoughts of Arya still lingered in his mind. Arya entered the restaurant, her red dress hugging her curves in all the right places. Dominic noticed the way others turned to look at her, but her eyes were fixed only on him. A sense of possessiveness stirred in his chest. You look beautiful, he murmured, kissing her cheek. She flushed slightly. Thank you. Taking their seats, he poured her a glass of wine. I see you decided to wear the gift. It's a beautiful dress, she admitted. Did you pick it out yourself? He raised a brow. Who else would have? She shrugged, feigning nonchalance. I don't know. A woman, maybe? He smirked. Arya, are you jealous? She scoffed. Of course not. Just curious. His gaze remained locked on hers. I saw it at Barney's and thought it would be perfect for you. Her lips twitched. Well, you have good taste. As the waiter approached, Dominic hid a smile. He enjoyed teasing her, especially because she played along so effortlessly. Halfway through dinner, Arya set down her spoon. So, what's the occasion? Dominic took a sip of his wine, his fingers brushing against the small box in his pocket. Anytime I see you feels like a special occasion. She rolled her eyes with a laugh. Dominic. He leaned in slightly. I was planning to propose. Arya's eyes widened. Here? Tonight? It's one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan, he said. Seemed like the perfect venue. She hesitated. I guess I thought... Thought what? He pressed. She swallowed. That you'd do something less cliché. His expression remained neutral, but her words stuck with him. Was she expecting something different? Something real? Before he could overthink it, he reached into his pocket, took the ring, and dropped to one knee. Gasps echoed through the restaurant. Arya's lips parted in surprise. Dominic? Arya Edison, will you marry me? For a second, she said nothing. Then she smiled. Yes. As applause erupted, she wrapped her arms around his neck, playing the part to perfection. Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger, and she admired it with a soft expression. Their eyes met. Without thinking, he leaned in and kissed her. It was supposed to be for show, but the moment their lips met, he realized he'd made a mistake. She tasted sweet, like wine, and something else entirely hers. For a moment, it was just them. And that was dangerous. Dominic draped his jacket over Arya's shoulders as they left the restaurant, shielding her from the cool night air. Photographers swarmed them outside. Can we get a picture? Dominic pulled Arya close, and she leaned into him, playing the role of a happy fiancée. As the camera flashed, she thought about how surreal it all felt. He was a billionaire, and this was a business arrangement. But sometimes, like tonight, it didn't feel like one. As they slipped into the car, Arya exhaled. That was some night. Dominic smirked. Would you have preferred a warning? Probably, she admitted. You played your part beautifully. Her cheeks warmed. So did you. Taking her hand, he traced his thumb over the ring. Now that we're officially engaged, maybe we should drop the formalities. She grinned. Maybe I'll call you Iceman instead. He chuckled. Dominic will do just fine, Spitfire. The way he said it made her stomach flip. She needed to be careful. When they reached her apartment building, Dominic followed her inside. Where exactly do you think you're going? She asked, eyeing him. He shrugged. Walking you to your door. Fiancé duties. She hesitated. Letting him inside would be a bad idea. He was already too charming for her own good. As they reached her door, she shifted awkwardly. Well, this is me. Dominic stepped closer, pressing a hand against the doorframe. Her breath caught as his eyes darkened. I'm not asking to come in, he murmured. But I'm going to kiss you again. She should have said no. Should have stepped away. But when he leaned in, she didn't resist. His lips met hers in a slow, deliberate kiss, stealing the air from her lungs. Her hands fisted his shirt, pulling him closer as warmth spread through her. When he pulled back, her heart pounded in her chest. "Good night, Spitfire," he whispered. And just like that, he was gone, leaving her breathless against the door. Arya sat at the table, glancing at the stack of magazines Vincent had thrown in front of her. She already knew what was inside pictures of her and Dominic's engagement, splashed across gossip columns. The world had taken notice, and even old friends from high school had reached out. Vincent, ever the opportunist, was thrilled. The more publicity your relationship gets, the harder they'll work to keep things quiet when your marriage falls apart, he said with a smug grin. Arya sighed. You're assuming it will fall apart. It will, Vincent assured her. Men like Dominic Devereaux don't stay faithful. She refused to believe that. Dominic wasn't like Vincent, selfish, manipulative. He had been nothing but respectful to her. If he signs the morality clause, he won't be stupid enough to break it, she said. Vincent leaned forward, his expression darkening. Then we'll make sure he does. She groaned, already dreading his so-called plan. You mean the honey trap idea? That's ridiculous. If you're so sure he won't cheat, what's the harm? Vincent challenged. I'm not marrying someone just to prove you right. Vincent's laugh was cruel. And what's your alternative? That he actually loves you? That you get some fairy tale ending? Her jaw tightened. No. But this marriage secures Paige's future. If it helps save Dad's business, and if Dominic and I can raise kids together as friends, that's more than most people get. Vincent shook his head, unimpressed. You're so naive. Arya refused to let him manipulate her. Even if you try your little setup, I wouldn't divorce Dominic. That set him off. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly, slamming his fist on the table. This isn't up for negotiation. He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. Pain seared through her scalp, but she didn't fight. Fighting only made things worse. You will do what I say, Arya, he snarled. You're the reason Dad's dead, and if you don't do something useful for a change, I'll marry Paige off too. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Yes, Vincent, she whispered. He released her with a satisfied smirk. Good girl. Now, let's have some tea. Arya forced a smile and handed him the teapot, swallowing her pain like she always did. Dominic stood beside Mason, both staring at the painting on his office wall. We had some great summers at that beach, Mason said. Dominic nodded. We sure did. Mason sighed. I wanted to take Amber there this summer, but she doesn't want to go. Can't stand to be away from her friends. Dominic bit back the advice forming on his tongue. So, what are you going to do? Mason ran a hand through his hair. I'm not divorcing her. Dominic frowned. Why not? You're both miserable. His brother exhaled sharply. If I wanted someone else, I wouldn't be this miserable, would I? Dominic nodded, conceding the point. Fair enough. Mason changed the subject. So, when's the wedding? Dominic leaned against his desk. Thinking the 3rd of next month. Mason groaned. I'll be out of town. Damn. Can't get out of it? Nope. But you still need a best man. Dominic rolled his eyes. It's not a real wedding, Mason. Mason smirked. Marriage changes things, whether you like it or not. Before Dominic could argue, there was a knock at the door. Come in, he called. Arya entered, her smile radiant. I just saw the cutest dog in the elevator. He was wearing an actual necktie. Mason chuckled, shaking her hand. Dominic noticed the way his brother warmed up to her instantly. Annoyed, he snapped. Didn't you have somewhere to be, Mason? Mason gave Arya a warm goodbye, and, before leaving, shot Dominic a smug thumbs up. Dominic scowled. He already knew his brothers would adore her, and the thought unsettled him more than it should. After Mason left, Arya settled into a chair, happily munching on a jelly donut. You have... Dominic instinctively reached forward, wiping a bit of jelly from her lip with his thumb. The moment stretched between them, tension crackling. Her green eyes darkened slightly, and for a brief second, he imagined her lips wrapped around his thumb, her tongue. Shaking himself, he pulled back and sucked the jelly off his own hand. Arya blinked. You like the painting? Yeah. Did your mom paint it? How'd you know? She smirked. It's signed Verona Devereaux right there. He chuckled. Most people don't notice. She shrugged. I have an eye for detail. Dominic handed her a contract. Prenup. A copy was sent to your lawyer and Vincent. Her expression stiffened at her brother's name. I trust the lawyer to look it over. You should still read it. She hesitated. I know what I'm agreeing to, Dominic. We get married, we have kids. That's all I care about. This protects you too. I don't have anything to protect. He sighed. It outlines custody arrangements, alimony. She sat up straighter. Why would we get divorced? He looked at her like she had asked why the sky was blue. Nobody plans for it. This is just insurance. Her lips pressed together. I want this to work. So do I, he admitted. Let's go over it, then grab dinner. She glanced at her scrubs. I'm not dressed for a fancy place. Then we'll go somewhere casual. She smiled, and just like that, the tension eased. They spent the next hour reviewing the contract. She didn't even flinch at the morality clause if she cheated. No alimony. If he cheated, he'd owe her $50 million. Satisfied, they both signed. Later, at a pizza joint, Arya took a massive bite and licked grease from her chin. Dominic had to look away before his thoughts got too dangerous. I guess you don't usually eat at places like this, she teased. He smirked. Mason loves it, so I've been a few times. Her brows lifted. Really? Not Mason? No. He's more of a steak and wine guy. I'm looking forward to meeting your brothers. Are they as nice as Mason? Dominic laughed. Mason? Nice? That's new. He was lovely. You made an impression on him. She grinned playfully. I guess I'm just wildly charismatic. Dominic rolled his eyes. Don't push it, Spitfire. She laughed, and something about the sound settled deep inside him. About the wedding, he said, steering the conversation back. Saturday the 3rd, at my family estate. No press. Her smile faltered. Dominic. Are we inviting my family? He hesitated, knowing she was really asking about Vincent. You can invite whoever you want, Ari. Her expression was unreadable. Okay. He nodded, but something told him that wasn't the answer she'd been hoping for. Arya sat in front of the mirror as her sister, Paige, twirled a lock of her hair between her fingers. Their green eyes, so similar, reflected both excitement and unspoken emotions. You look so pretty, Ari, Paige said with a giggle, taking a sip of champagne. Arya glanced down at her simple cream dress. Thanks, Ash. And Dominic is so handsome, Paige added with a grin. He is, Arya admitted, though she kept deeper thoughts to herself. Paige wrapped an arm around her waist, resting her head on Arya's shoulder. Dad would be so proud to walk you down the aisle, you know? A lump formed in Arya's throat. She hadn't told her sister the truth about this marriage, that it was more of a contract than a romance. Paige believed in a whirlwind love story, unaware that Arya was doing this to save their family business and secure Paige's future. Are you sad Ad's not here? Paige asked, breaking Arya's thoughts. She forced a smile. Yeah, but I'll see him in a few weeks. And you're videoing the whole thing to send him, right? Paige rolled her eyes. Of course. He'd never forgive me if I didn't. The room fell quiet for a moment before Paige turned to face Arya directly. Do you love him, Ari? Yes. The lie came easily. Or maybe it wasn't entirely a lie. She knew she could love Dominic if she let herself. Paige studied her closely. Just know that you don't have to do anything you don't want. You're the best person I know, and nothing will ever change how much I love you. Arya squeezed her sister's hand, touched by her concern. I want this, Ash. You're sure? Yes. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't lying. Paige grinned, hugging her tightly. I'm going to hold on to you for at least another 5 minutes before you become Mrs. Dominic Devereaux. I'll always be your Ari. Always, sis. Dalton Devereaux, Dominic's father, handed Arya a glass of scotch as he approached her. Here. You look like you could use one of these. She accepted it with a grateful smile. I sure could. Thanks. There's no need to be nervous, Dalton assured her. Dominic is a good man. He'll take care of you, and you two will have fine babies. Arya swallowed hard at the implication, but she smiled nonetheless. I wish my dad were here. Dalton nodded, his expression solemn. Your father was a good man, Miss Edison. Please, call me Ari, she insisted. He gave her a small nod. He would be proud of you, Ari. A pang of guilt hit her. Would her father truly be proud, knowing she was marrying Dominic out of duty rather than love? She could almost hear his voice telling her not to make the same mistakes he had, that life was too short not to marry for love. Dalton raised his glass in a toast. Welcome to the family. Arya returned the gesture and downed the scotch, feeling its warmth burn down her throat. As Vincent, her older brother, approached, she quickly turned to Dalton. Would you mind escorting me? Dalton chuckled. Now, if I have to call you Ari, you have to call me Dalton. Deal. Dalton offered his arm, and she took it. Together, they walked toward the garden archway where Dominic stood waiting. He looked breathtaking in his black tuxedo, and for a fleeting moment, Arya wished this were real. She wished she was marrying him out of love, not necessity. Dominic caught her gaze and winked, making her heart flutter unexpectedly. She reminded herself of her reasons: security, stability, a good man by her side. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it could be enough. The reception was intimate, filled only with close family. Dominic handed Arya another glass of scotch, and she took it without hesitation. "Have I told you how amazing you look in that dress, Mrs. Devereaux?" She glanced down at her gown. "Thank you." Dominic wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer. "You've been incredible today. I know this wasn't the wedding you dreamed of, but we can make it a successful marriage." Successful. The word felt cold. She wanted more than just success, but she swallowed the thought along with another sip of scotch. Dominic leaned in, his warm breath tickling her ear. "You think we should put some music on?" Arya glanced around. The gathering was small: his father, brothers, her mother, Paige, and Vincent. Not exactly a wild party. Not sure music could liven up this crowd. Dominic smirked. "Not even Yeah by Usher?" A laugh bubbled out of her. "You play that, and I'm filing for divorce." His playful expression darkened as he whispered, "You're mine now, Arya. All of you. I'll give you 6 months, but then all bets are off." A shiver ran down her spine, but before she could respond, Paige grabbed her arm. "This house is incredible. Please tell me we can spend the holidays here." Arya hesitated, looking at Dominic. He met her gaze and nodded. "If that's what you want." Paige squealed with excitement, dragging Arya away. As she left, she could still feel Dominic's intense gaze following her. Later that night, Blake, one of Dominic's brothers, nudged him. "I think it's time to take your wife home, brother." Dominic glanced at Arya. She was laughing with Mason, but when Vincent approached, her smile faded instantly. Her entire posture tensed, making Dominic's jaw tighten. He didn't know what it was between them, but he didn't like it. Marching over, he placed a hand on Arya's back. "Time to go home." She blinked up at him, a little dazed, and took his hand. Saying a quick goodbye to her sister, she let him lead her to the car. During the ride, she snuggled against him, her head resting on his shoulder. He tried not to notice how soft she felt, how good she smelled. But by the time they reached the penthouse, he was burning with frustration. When Teddy, their driver, opened the car door, Arya giggled. "Tedward." Teddy grinned. "Mrs. Devereaux." Arya laughed again, the sound light and carefree. Dominic smirked. "That is your name now." He swatted her playfully. "Now get inside." As soon as they were in the bedroom, Arya curled up on the bed, watching him with heavy-lidded eyes. "It's our wedding night." "I'm aware." She bit her lip. "Aren't we supposed to, consummate the marriage?" Dominic exhaled slowly. "You're too drunk, Spitfire." "I can give my consent," she murmured. He groaned, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I'd rather you remember our first time." She hummed, reaching for him. "Can I at least kiss you?" He sighed. "Sure." She pushed herself up, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. The taste of scotch and sweetness lingered, and it took everything in him not to deepen the kiss. She blinked up at him. "Can you stay until I fall asleep?" His chest tightened. He knew staying was a bad idea, but he couldn't say no. With a sigh, he lay beside her, letting her nestle against him. "Good night, husband," she whispered. "Good night, Ari," he murmured, though he knew sleep wouldn't come easy for him. As she drifted off, he slipped away, watching her peaceful face. She trusted him. Whether she should or not, she did. And to his surprise, that trust mattered more to him than anything else. Dominic adjusted his cufflinks as Arya walked into the kitchen. She frowned. "Are you working today?" "It's Sunday. The day after their wedding." He nodded. "I got a call from the police station. A new case." "So, you're going to get him out?" She assumed it was a man. Dominic smirked. "Wouldn't be a very good lawyer if I didn't." Memories of the previous night flashed through her mind, her arms around his neck, her whispered plea. Heat rushed to her cheeks. What did he do? "Something that got him arrested," Dominic replied cryptically, slipping on his suit jacket. She rubbed her temples and he shot her a knowing look. "There's fresh coffee in the pot and Tylenol in the cupboard above it." "Thanks." "I'm sorry I got so drunk." He huffed a small laugh. "No need to apologize. My brothers are aggressive with the scotch." She winced at the memory. "What time will you be back?" "Hard to say." He shrugged. "Depends on what's waiting for me at the station." A strange regret settled in her chest. Was this what her life would be like now? Sitting alone in this giant penthouse while he worked? It wasn't like they were a real couple. He wouldn't even touch her on their wedding night. "Why don't you hang out with your sister?" he suggested. "She left early this morning. Had to get back to Boston." He hesitated before saying, "Hopefully, I won't be too long. We can grab an early dinner." Her nod came embarrassingly fast. If he noticed her eagerness, he didn't comment. Instead, he simply nodded and walked out the door. Arya checked the clock again, almost 9:00 p.m. Dominic still wasn't home. Maybe if it weren't so late, she wouldn't feel like an idiot for waiting around all day, expecting dinner like some devoted wife. A fresh wave of frustration hit her. He could have at least called or sent a text. But then again, he had always been clear about what their relationship was. Just because he could be charming and attractive didn't mean it was anything more than an arrangement. She scrolled through TV channels until she found an old 80s movie. Curling up on the couch, she tried to ignore the sinking feeling in her gut. "Hey, Sleeping Beauty." Arya startled awake to find Dominic standing over her. "What time is it?" She rubbed her eyes. "A little before midnight." She blinked. "Where the hell have you been?" His brows furrowed. "Working," she scoffed. "Until midnight?" "Yes, Ari. I'm sorry if my working hours don't fit your schedule." Anger bubbled inside her. "I'm sorry that you'd rather spend time with some criminal than take your wife to dinner the day after our wedding." His expression darkened. "Are you kidding me? You knew what my job was. And this," he gestured between them, "doesn't come before that. I've had a hell of a day, and I don't need to come home to you yelling at me." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I'll remember my place in the future, sir." She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist, spinning her back to face him. Her heart pounded as his body heat seeped through her dress. His voice was low. "Don't start with the smart mouth, Ari. Not tonight." They glared at each other, breath heavy. Then, as if realizing he'd gone too far, he exhaled and released her. "Ari," he called as she walked away. Without looking back, she snapped, "I'm going to bed." Chapter 20. Dominic ran a frustrated hand through his hair. He had been an idiot. His day had been terrible, but that didn't give him an excuse to treat her like that. Forgetting their dinner plans was bad enough. Not even texting her? Worse. He sighed and walked down the hallway. Knocking on her door, he called out, "I'm coming in, Ari. If you're naked, you've got 5 seconds to stop me." Silence. He pushed open the door. She lay on the bed, bathed in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. She sniffed. "What do you want?" Sitting on the edge of the bed, he faced her. "You think we could try this again?" She snorted. Dominic smirked. "Hey, honey, I'm home." This time, she almost smiled. "I'm sorry I didn't make it home for dinner. I should have called. I'm not used to having to check in with someone." "That's not—" "I know," he cut her off. "No excuses." She nudged his hip with her foot. "Then tell me about your bad day." Dominic hesitated before lying down beside her. "I forgot about dinner, Ari. I'm sorry. When I work, I forget about everything else. But I know I'm not an island anymore. I'll try to do better." She turned onto her side, blinking up at him. "You started to say something earlier. About when you saw me asleep on the couch." He swallowed. "I was relieved to have someone to come home to. But then you started yelling at me, and well, you wouldn't understand." Her hand rested on his chest. "I want to understand. Help me." Dominic let out a long breath. "Fine. I'll tell you something. But it stays between us." She nodded. Taking a deep breath, he began. "My father wanted me to go into the family business, but I chose law instead. I started in corporate law, but then something happened that changed everything." Arya remained quiet, listening. "My younger brother, Maddox, had a girlfriend in high school, Yasmin. My father hated her. She had purple hair, a lip ring, and came from a poor neighborhood. They were always getting into trouble, but she helped him through a hard time. One night, he took her to a party. They fought, and he left. That night, 3 guys at the party. They hurt her." Arya gasped, eyes wide. She was brave. She went to the cops, pressed charges. But the guys had expensive lawyers. They tore her apart on the stand. The prosecutor barely tried. He exhaled. She killed herself before the trial was even over. Arya's breath hitched. "Oh my God." "The guys were acquitted," he continued. "Her father, he shot 2 of them the next day. The DA went after him harder than the rapists. He refused my help and got 2 life sentences." Tears streamed down Arya's face. "That's why you switched to criminal law." Dominic nodded. "I wanted to even the playing field." "But don't you only represent rich people?" He frowned. She held up a hand. I mean, how can someone without money afford you? I take on a lot of pro bono cases. Cops in the city know I'll help people who need it. She considered this. So did the guy you helped today actually do it? It doesn't matter to me. Her brow furrowed. Dominic sighed. The world isn't black and white, Ari. The law and justice aren't always the same thing. She swallowed hard. Then it doesn't matter to me either. For the first time that day, Dominic felt lighter. Arya squeezed his hand. I'm sorry I yelled at you. I kind of enjoy it, he admitted, smirking. She laughed softly, her breath warm against his cheek. I guess we both need to figure out how to make this work. We're doing pretty well so far. She yawned. What happened to the third guy? Dominic hesitated. He died later. She didn't press further, too exhausted to ask for details. Within moments, she was asleep, her hand still resting on his chest. Dominic stayed awake for hours, listening to her steady breaths, feeling closer to someone than he ever had before. It had been just over 2 weeks since the wedding, and despite the awkward beginning, Arya and Dominic had settled into a routine. Their work schedules were similar, and Dominic often dropped her off and picked her up. There was an undeniable tension between them, flirty exchanges. Accidental touches that sent shivers down her spine. She considered making a move, but something always held her back. Dominic, ever the gentleman, never crossed the line, leaving her wondering if she was the only one feeling the electricity between them. That evening, she arrived home to the mouth-watering aroma of garlic and tomatoes. Dominic was in the kitchen, cooking shirtless. Her breath hitched as she took in his sculpted back, muscles flexing as he stirred a pot. It wasn't just the smell of dinner making her mouth water. You're home early, she managed to say, trying to sound casual. Dominic turned, revealing an even more impressive front broad shoulders, chiseled abs, and sweatpants that left little to the imagination. His smirk told her he'd caught her staring. My trial finished early. I decided to cook. She stepped closer, intrigued. What are we having? Paprika chicken and patatas bravas. She raised an eyebrow. Fancy. It's my mom's recipe, he said, his voice softer. She was Spanish, right? He nodded. S. My father met her in Valencia. Watching him cook, she asked, Do you speak Spanish? S. Sí, ora. Pero solo cuando estoy enojado. His teasing tone sent a spark through her. I have no idea what you just said, but it sounded hot. His low chuckle sent warmth through her chest. I said yes, but only when I'm mad or something else. Something else? The way he looked at her made her wonder exactly what that something else was. During dinner, she couldn't stop moaning over how good the food was. This is incredible. Dominic simply gave her that half smile of his. You're just naturally good at everything, aren't you? He arched an eyebrow. I guess you'll have to wait and see, Spitfire. Her heart raced. How much longer could they keep up this constant flirting before something snapped? Their conversation turned to family. Dominic spoke about losing his mother when he was 26. She shared how her father's death when she was 13 had left her and her sister, Ash, feeling alone. Dominic, perceptive as always, asked, Is that why you're so protective of her? I don't think I'm overly protective. She's my baby sister. It's not a criticism, he said gently. When you told me why you were marrying me, one of your reasons was that you wouldn't have to worry about your sister. It sounds like you've always looked out for her. His insight took her off guard. I guess. After Dad died, Mom fell apart, and Vincent. She swallowed hard. He became the center of her world. It felt like it was just me and Ash against everyone. Dominic's expression darkened slightly, as if something in her story hit too close to home. And who protected you, Ari? She frowned. I didn't need protecting. Ash was the baby. You were only 13. His quiet understanding shook her. Adrian, maybe, when he was around. The cousin Vincent kept away? Yeah. Dominic's jaw clenched. So you lost your dad and your best friend at the same time? She nodded. I guess that's how I became such a Spitfire. His half-smile returned. I suppose it was chaos, growing up with 4 brothers, she said, steering the conversation away from painful memories. He chuckled. That's one word for it. You're close to them? Yes. Especially Maddox. I hope I get to meet him someday. His expression turned unreadable. I'm sure you will. Later, as they put away the dishes, she openly admired him. If he was going to walk around shirtless looking like that, it was his own fault. Catching her staring, he smirked. Enjoying yourself there, Spitfire? She sighed dramatically. I mean, I was. He took a step closer, his eyes locked on hers. Looking at me like that is going to get you into trouble. She tilted her head. Maybe I could use a little trouble. His eyes darkened. I bet you could use more than a little. His hand found her hip, fingers digging in just enough to make her breath hitch. Their lips brushed, heat coiling between them. But before they could cross the line, his phone buzzed. Cursing under his breath, he answered. After a tense exchange, he sighed. I have to go. Now? I've been expecting this call for weeks. I'm